Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jack the Lad podcast. On today's episode, we've got on Peter Frank. He is currently canoeing down the Mississippi River, dressed as a pirate, as you can see if you're watching this on YouTube. He also unicycled across America, north to south, at the age of 19, which is a distance of 2,400 miles, where he raised $28,000 for the Beacon House. And just like to give him a warm welcome, everybody. It's Peter Frank.
Hello, thank you for having me.
That's all right, no worries. Sorry about the previous technical issues.
That's perfectly all right.
So, yeah, we've sort of restarted this again. A few issues my end. Amateur mistake, to be honest. So as we've sort of spoke there, and said in the intro, you're only young now. You're only 21.
That's right.
And the list that you've given me in this our pre sort of interview is a hell of a lot of stuff, to be honest. I think most people would be happy if they achieve that within by the age of 50.
To run through it as quickly as possible with the bullet points. I don't think I've ever run through the whole story that fast.
Yeah, it's fine. Well, we'll stretch it out now, and it'll be awesome. So talk us through it then. What was the sort of the starting point with all of this?
Well, the true starting point would probably be when I was 11 years old, and my brother had taught me how to ride a unicycle. I practically twisted his arm and begged him into teaching me. So, you know how older brothers are, and so I always looked up to him. And since he was riding a unicycle, I wanted to be part of that. Wanted to learn it from him. So he taught me how to ride a unicycle very young. And then when I was 14 is when more of my life trajectory kind of did take place. So I was hiding in a leaf pile at the age of 14 on my friend as she went in for dinner, and I was planning on jumping out and scaring her because I had a lot of energy and everything. So I was hiding in the leaf pile when a vehicle was a couple of local kids were driving around, and they had driven through the leaf pile unaware that I was laying down, and so I was moved 14 feet from the leaf pile, and I broke 14 bones getting run over by the car, and I was airlifted to a hospital in Marquette, Michigan, which was an hour away from my house. And I'd say that was the beginning of everything. Because it's like, I don't know, I feel like near death experiences really change people, or at least the people that I've met that have had near death experiences. You just kind of enjoy life a lot more having given a second chance, in my personal perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about that earlier, actually. In the news, there's 3 dads that are walking from Parliament to Parliament around the UK because all 3 of their daughters committed suicide, which is like, it was quite close to me because I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and I love her to bits. And I was thinking about. Go on, sorry.
Did they say why they committed suicide?
They didn't. It was sort of glossed over in the media, and I haven't looked into it too deep, to be honest. But yeah, no, it was just that sort of that their daughters, obviously that tragic event has meant they're now raising awareness about suicide and all the rest of it. And it was it's there's a lot of the times it is sort of a tragic event that's close to home, or like you say, a near death experience that then makes people sort of look at their life and say life is precious and it is very short, so we need to own it while we're here, really, because you only get one crack at it.
Yeah, we don't we tend to not enjoy life as much when things come comfortably, and it's like, obviously, a near death experience is very tragic. It's an experience that doesn't happen to a lot of people, and after a lot of people have that experience, it awakens you to some deeper sense of gratitude for the life that you've been given, and it gives you an ability to pursue that gratitude for your own benefit. And you get to a point where you take your own happiness into your own responsibility instead of depending on like temporal pleasures in society, like casual sex or drugs or alcohol. You find more enjoyment in the little things, I find, in my experience anyway, and the people that I've talked to that have gone through something like crazy, like getting hit by a bus or something. And I don't know. I always found that remarkable. Like the people that you talk, like you can hear it in their voice. It's like there's like different kinds of people, and it's like the people that have never experienced or even have the capability of experiencing that kind of gratitude because they've never seen it before. And like you can talk to those people, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is like a person, it's a human being. And then there's people that are like, you talk to, and it's like, wow, they, like you can just see it in their eyes. It's like they completely change their life having been shown something above themselves. And I think a lot of us fall into the trap of self-preservation. We fall into the trap of the ego, fall into the trap of temporary pleasures in society. I mean, like basically, and the entire society around us is based around entrapment of, just like temporal pleasures. I mean, we live in at least I live in a country, America, where pornography is free, but yet you have to get carded to go and drink alcohol. But it's just like, it's not a vetted thing. It's like anybody can access the most, some of the most like destructive sources on the internet and at any time. It's just, I don't know, it's just a huge red flag that pornography is free. Once when you like start actually thinking about like, wait a minute, like this is really destructive. And like you have like, you said you have a 12-year-old daughter. I mean, like she has the ability to access that whole network of the internet at any point in time. And it's just, why is that a thing? Why is that not one of the most talked about things on the planet right now? Is how we're basically being incentivized to destroy ourselves, and I think a large portion of that, I think a lot of the reasons why that is because, well, for one, there's like 5 billionaires that basically own everything, like through the combination of the banks and the financial systems and the oligarchs and the people that own the energy sources that we use, that we pay like $6, $7. I don't know what the prices are for gas a gallon in Australia, but it just seems absurd that I don't know. The more you like start thinking about why the world works this way, the more like redundant it sounds. It's like, wait a minute, why is this a thing? Why does this exist? Why is society like this way? Why are we incentivized to entrap ourselves in pornography and temporal pleasures? Why is birth control incentivized when it shrinks the ovaries of most women up to 50% and destroys your periods and makes irregular cycles and causes infertility? Why does it shrink your brain and it's still somehow legalized in America, at least, and it's incentivized too? I mean, there's influencers out there that are just so hell-bent on getting famous by incentivizing really destructive things in their lives, like birth control. And it's like, I don't know, that's just, the more that I thought about it, the more it's just like, it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't put a lot of thought into them things, to be honest, until you've just brought them up. Especially on sort of the pornography front. I understand what you're saying there totally, and obviously, like you say, as I've got a 12-year-old and she does have a phone, that she has got unlimited access to that, which is quite worrying. I like to think she's sort of very responsible and whatnot, but yeah, I get what you're saying there, and with the birth control as well. also, just on a side note, you said Australia. I'm in the UK.
You're in the UK.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
You have an Australian accent. No, you don't. Hold on.
I've never
I,
heard that. I've never heard anyone tell me that before.
well, I guess I'm just like the most sheltered person on the planet then. But
Yeah, I think that's just an Americanism, to be honest.
okay, that's right. You did mention the UK.
But yeah,
Yeah,
anyway, we
sorry
sort
about
of
that.
went off piece pretty early there. So you
Australia.
obviously mentioned that you mentioned that obviously you hit by a car at 14.
Yeah.
What happened from there?
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Yeah. When you're on the river for as long as I've been, you think about things a lot. You have a lot of time to think. So after after I was run over by the car, I was airlifted to the Marquette General Hospital, and I stayed there for a total of 30 days, 1 month. And I went through the first week I was sedated, so I didn't remember anything up until I woke up. And then I spent 1 week in an intensive care unit, and then a month and a half in a wheelchair. And during my time in the hospital, I I was able to see my family every day because of this organization called the Beacon House, and they operate much like a Ronald McDonald House. Uh, they'll house people's families while their loved ones are in the hospital. And so we didn't, we were an hour away from the hospital, so we didn't, have we couldn't drive back and forth, or my parents couldn't drive back and forth every day just to see me. So it was a huge help being as young as I was for my mental health, especially to be able to see my family every day based off of what they had done and the housing that they had provided for my family. And so when I was when I had back surgery and I woke up, uh, they told me that I'd have to relearn how to walk. And the back surgeon that performed my surgery, he told me that if I relearn how to walk, I would never be able to ride a unicycle again. And it's like if you think about it in a way that's not so abnormal, like somebody who is really good at playing it, like broke all their fingers, and then
Mm.
they're told if you can have feeling in your fingers again, you'll never be able to play guitar. That's basically what it was. And so I was devastated, being as young as I was, my young mind, like that was like the only thing in my life at the time that I held near and dear to my heart, because I learned it from my brother, which was my idol, and I was just like I loved unicycling. That was like my thing. And so I went through a year and a half of physical therapy, through like pool therapy, treadmill running, and things like that, just to be able to like walk stable. And after a year and a half of physical therapy, I started unicycling again, and that was against doctor's orders, kind of. I don't know. It was like a year and a half. I felt fine, but I started unicycling again, and then 6 years after I was run over, which would be summer, at the age of 19 years old, I rode a unicycle 2,100 miles from Appleton, Wisconsin to Phoenix, Arizona, over a span of 3.5 months. And I raised $28,000 for the charity organization in Marquette, Michigan that housed my family during my time in the hospital.
Wow, that's amazing. What was the reason that you chose to unicycle? Not that you chose to unicycle, obviously you've give that, but the reason, doing it north to south.
So my brother that taught me how to unicycle, he helped me build the gear racks to hold the storage, and that was in Appleton, Wisconsin. So when I was trying to figure out where to go, because like I was very like when I started the unicycle trip, I had like $600 in my wallet. So that was like I didn't have a lot of money, and so I didn't have enough money to like get a plane ticket and fly to like New York or California. So I just started right where I built the unicycle, which was Appleton, Wisconsin. And I was trying to think of like the farthest place that I could go and stop at and be fine without being like lost in the middle of nowhere. So my sister lives in Phoenix, Arizona, So that's where I decided to go. So I rode from my brother's house to my sister's house. It's like, hey sis, I'll be right over in 3.5 months.
Yeah, yeah, nice. Make a bed
And
for
so
me.
yeah, yeah. So I rode, yeah. So I did 400 miles south from Appleton, Wisconsin to Bloomington, Illinois, and then I took Route 66 for 1,800 miles to Flagstaff, Arizona, and then from Flagstaff I did 163 miles, and I did the 9,000 foot descent from Flagstaff to Phoenix.
Oh right,
And
blooming heck.
so, uh,
That's a fair old drop.
yeah, it's so Flagstaff, Arizona is up on a mountain, and Phoenix, Arizona is down in the desert. So like when I was in Flagstaff, it was like 45, 50 degrees at the end of September every day. Very cloudy because you're very high in elevation, and there's a lot of trees, a lot of green, and then in Phoenix, Arizona, it was just all desert, and it was like 109 degrees every day, all dry heat. So it was. I did that in I think 9 days. I did the 163 miles. Pretty sure it's 9 days.
What was the biggest challenge that you perhaps overlooked beforehand? What was the thing that sort of you came up against and were like, oh, I didn't think of that?
Uh, Route 66 is very desolate. It's there's attractions here and there, and people do it because it's very historic. But because it's historic, it's also very old in a lot of places. And since it's old, there's a lot of old houses, and a lot of the people on Route 66 don't really see a lot of travelers walking or bicycling, or especially unicycling. So they have an abundance of dogs that never really see people. So I've been bitten and attacked by quite a bit of dogs on Route 66. Um, and there was even I met a gentleman. His name is Kevin, and he's a really awesome guy. He's a cyclist, and he was biking Route 66 for like the fifth time in his life. He's like, I forgot how old he was. He's 50 something. Um, and so he was biking Route 66, and I met him in Oklahoma, maybe Texas. I think I met him in Oklahoma. Yeah, I met him in Oklahoma. And when we got to New Mexico, because I rode with him intermittently here and there, when we got to New Mexico, there was a place where it was just so desolate that there was like one barn in like a 50-mile radius, which is abnormal because usually the towns are like 20 miles apart. So there's like this 50-mile stretch or something where it was just nothing but like desert basically, and it was all flat. It might have been no, it might have been Texas. It was like really close to New Mexico, but um, the I wasn't riding with Kevin at this point. I was riding close to Kevin. I was in front of him, so I was in front of him by like 2 days, and I got to this place where there was like this barn, and there was like a group of trees in between the barn and the road, but you could like kind of see through the trees. And when I got to the barn, there were two 80-pound pit bulls sitting in front of the barn. And I was riding by, and I got off the unicycle and I looked through the trees, and all of a sudden one of the dogs get up and he starts sniffing the air because he can smell me. And I'm like, oh no, that's a really big dog. And I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And like, I don't want to get mauled by a dog today. So what do you do in that situation? Like he doesn't know I'm there. I see him through the trees. He smells me. So I start walking because if I get on the unicycle, I'll make some noise and then he'll start charging. So I start walking, like speed walking, as far as I can over, away from the barn along the road. And he's smelling and he's following the trees, and I get to the end of the trees, and then all of like I walked far enough where I was maybe like 150, 200 feet from the end of the trees, and he gets to the end of the trees, so he's like 200 feet from me, and all of a sudden he sees me, and he locks eye contact, and he's ceaselessly focused on me and my unicycle, and I'm like, oh shit, this is it, and the other dog gets up behind him. He's like, oh, what are you doing? And then like the dog starts like walking very slowly towards me, and he's kind of like picking up speed, and he's just about to start charging at me. I have a can of bear spray. I whip out my bear spray. I pull off the cap, the safety pin, and I'm getting ready to like blast this dog in the eyes. Like, and he starts charging at me, and the other dog behind him is getting up, and he's walking over. I notice, and this dog, the one that was sniffing, he starts running as fast as he can in my direction, and he maybe got like, this whole thing was like, since the time he started running to the time I got at the bear spray was maybe like 7 seconds. So it wasn't that long, but this like entire moment felt like forever because it was just such a captivating moment. And then all of a sudden I hear this whistle, and the dog sits and turns around and looks at the barn, and there's a gentleman standing there leaning up against the barn. And then the dog runs back to the barn. I'm like, oh my God. Like, if that guy. So a lot of people would tell me, "Oh, what if the dog was friendly?" Well, the funny thing was is that I met up with Kevin a couple of days after this, and we stayed in a motel. And I was telling him the story, and he says, "Oh, no way! I passed those same pit bulls, and while I was biking, they chased me, and one of them bit my ankle." He shows me this big gouge in his ankle, and he says that he pulled out his bear spray while these two pit bulls, the same pit bulls, and he puts the bear spray back, and he blasts one of them in the eye, and then he turns the other one and he blasts the other one in the eye, and he gets them both with the bear spray, and they almost tore open his ankle. And it was the same pit bulls because the owner wasn't there with the owner didn't whistle that time. Just wasn't there. So those dogs actually did go and attack him, and both of the dogs got bear sprayed in the eyes.
Oh, nice.
So it's like little things like that. It's just like, I don't know. It was the dogs of the road where that was the
Sketchy.
difficult part.
Very sketchy by the sounds
Like,
of things.
on the river, you got to like worry about alligators and ships, and on the road, you have to worry about semi trucks and dogs. That's about it.
Yeah, yeah. So what sort of distance were you covering a day then when you're on your unicycle? I know obviously it would depend on terrain and your elevation gain and whatnot, but sort of an average day, what were you covering?
On average, I did about like 30 miles. That would usually take like less than 5 hours. So I didn't, and the reason for that is because all of your weight is like on one seat on your crotch, on your gooch. So it got quite painful if you do more than like 5 hours a day. So you try and get as far as you can in a very short amount of time on a unicycle. That's what you do. You pedal hard, and because the longer you spend putting all that pressure on your gooch, it's like you're going to get saddle sores, and it just sucks. It's a lot different than bicycling. Um, but in the beginning, I was doing like 10 miles a day, which sucked. But that was because I was not at all used to long distance cycling while carrying everything that you need to survive on a unicycle, and especially all of it was top weight. So I did like 10 miles a day, and I did that for like 2 weeks. Then I got to 20 miles a day, and then I started doing 30 miles a day. And then I remember my longest day was 13 and a half hours from the border of Arizona, the last state, to it might have been Hallbrook. I'm not Winslow. It was close to Winslow, Arizona. But that was 75 miles in 13 and a half hours. So that was a big day. And after that day, I had a flat tire, so I had to change my tire the next morning.
Yeah, what when you say obviously what the kit you packed and whatnot, how much sort of planning did you put into doing this? And did you sort of route plan and stops where you were roughly going to be stopping and any sort of prep work like that about nights over? Where did you stay? Were you sort of in a tent and all that sort of stuff?
So yeah, I had a tent. I didn't put much planning into like the routes or anything. I just I took it as I came, and I very much winged a lot of it. The preparation for the trip took about no, it would have been about four months. So but I was thinking about it for years. I learned about unicycle touring, and I'm sure you've heard of him, but his name is Edward Pratt, and he was the guy who unicycled around the world in 3.5 years. from 2015 to the middle of 2018, and he was from the UK. So, so I learned about unicycle touring from him, and he set the grounds for a lot of unicycle tourists on how to pack gear. And so I took inspiration for a lot of my trip from that. And so growing up, because I learned about him when I was like um, 18 and or maybe like 17, and I started studying a lot of that. So I was thinking about it years before I ever actually did it. So when I decided to like change my life around and raise money for charity and do good for myself and others, I that was already in my head. I was like, well, I like unicycling, and now I know that this is possible. I'm just going to go ride a unicycle really far. I'm going to see what happens. And so I did that. I loved it. It was amazing.
And
And
how?
so, all right,
No,
what? Go ahead.
go on, carry on.
No, you had a question?
I was just going to say, when you mentioned about getting a pop tire then after your longer day, what sort of issues did you have along the way, like maintenance wise with the bike and stuff like that? And was there any points where you threw, I don't know if you how you can brake. So obviously there's no chain and stuff. There's no chain, is there? Because it's just a fixed wheel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
How
a
I
fixed
understand it.
wheel.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
every pedal stroke is
is a
fixed to the
rotation.
wheel. Yeah, so you only go as fast as you can pedal.
So
I
how? Yeah. What sort of maintenance and upkeep did the unicycle need then?
So I got my first flat tire in the second from last day. I got my first flat tire in Tucumcari, New Mexico, and I also when I got to Tucumcari, I had three broken spokes because there was so much weight on the unicycle with all the gear. When I got to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I fixed my spokes, and I got a new tire in Tucumcari. But when I got to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I fixed my spokes there, and I had to redo and retune all my spokes. I didn't know how to do that, so I had to pay a REI store to help me out. And but once when I had fixed my tire and I left from Albuquerque, I I rode, I think like it was like 100 and something miles to Gallup, New Mexico. And then when I got to Gallup, I had another flat tire. And so I changed that up myself. I actually needed an entirely new tube because my tube was just torn apart. And my tire had like, my tire from riding like 2,000 miles, my tire was so smooth. Like I had no ridge bumps left on my tire. I started with a brand new tire, and so I had to order a new tire, new tube, and I had to wait in Gallup, New Mexico for 4 or 5 days, and so I changed those out. I rode from Gallup 40 miles to the border of Arizona and New Mexico, and then the next morning I got up at 5 a.m., got on the road by 6:30, and I did my 75-mile day in 13 and a half hours from the border of Arizona to close to Winslow. I think it was, I can't remember the town name. And I did 75 miles, and I got to a truck stop at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, somewhere around there. And when I got to the truck stop, I found a place to sleep. I actually got a motel that night because I was just so sore. And in the morning, I had another flat tire, like 2 days after I just changed my tire. So I had that flat tire was the third one on the trip, and so I just pulled the tube out, patched it up. It was an easy fix. It took like 45 minutes, and then I was back on the road. Did 30 miles again after that. Went up to Flagstaff, and I got another hole in my tire, or on my tube actually, and I couldn't find it. I put it underwater, couldn't find the bubbles. It just was like slowly leaking. I think it was the twist on cap. It was just slowly leaking air. And so what had happened was is like every day from Flagstaff all the way down to like the 9 days, every single morning I had to be like pumping up my tire because it was like flat every morning. And I was like, oh my God. So it would keep just enough air for me to do like 30 miles, and then it'd just be flat at the evening. And I'm like, oh my god, it sucked. But then I got to Phoenix, and I think the last day was the most hilarious because I got to Phoenix, Arizona on day 98, and then I didn't have anywhere to sleep because it's a big city and they don't allow homeless people anywhere, and like they don't let you sleep anywhere in the cities. And so I never go into cities because of that reason, because there's nowhere to pitch a tent. So I was pretty pissed off because I had gotten kicked out of the um, I had gotten kicked out of the park. I don't know what park it was, but it was a big park, and I was waiting there all day for it to turn nighttime. And I was 30 miles from my destination, and they kicked me out right at dark. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I don't have anywhere to sleep, dude. Like, there's no motels around here. And the only motels that are around here are like an hour or two away by unicycle, and they all cost like $250 because it's in Phoenix, Arizona. And so I needed to make like a last minute decision, and I thought it was hilarious where I slept that night. Is I thought of all the places, ran through all the contingencies in my head. I'm like, okay, so if I was homeless, like where would I go? And then I would avoid those places because like that's obviously where you're going to get mugged in a city. And so I was thinking, where was the least like if I was homeless, where wouldn't I go? And so like what came to my head was, oh, a police station, because like obviously it's illegal to do that. So I'm like, all right, I wouldn't sleep at a police station, so that's going to be, I mean, logically thinking like that's the safest place for me to go. So I went to the police station, I knocked on the door at first, and they said, no, no, go away. I'm like, okay. So I took my bedroll off of my thing. I didn't even use a tent. I just rolled it out right in the cement in front of the door of the police station, and I just slept right there in front of the police station because I was like so pissed off at the city for like not accommodating me or understanding that like they they're just willfully ignorant of the journey, and they don't understand that like, oh well, this guy needs a place to sleep. We'll just let him sleep in the park. He's not going to hurt anything. He's not like he's homeless. He's not going to destroy anything. He'll be on his way in the morning. But nobody thinks like that. So it's like all right, well, I'll just go sleep in front of the police station because if anything happens, it's on there on a camera, and it's not like they can arrest me anyway because it's like I'm I don't know. I think that's just what I was going on in my head. So it rained the next morning, so like everything got soaked, and I was just like sitting there in a sleeping bag out in the cement. So that sucked. But I packed up everything and rode the 30 miles to the finish line. So
So
I thought that
for
was
the
just
whole
hilarious.
night, you had no hassle at all. That no police came past you and sort of said
No,
anything.
there was nobody there. There was just the clerk at the counter, the girl, and she was her English wasn't the best, and she just told me to go away. I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna sleep right here. Screw you guys. Like, if anything happens, like, you guys are sworn to protect. So I'm just gonna pitch my bag right here and be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
And I was fine. It's fine with me.
yeah. So, I mean, yeah. Out of all the places, that is probably the least likely to to be policed because it's a police station. You're right. Um, so you finished that,
I did.
and then what was the next sort of you know in fact, we'll bring this episode to a close,
Okay.
and we'll get into your what you're currently doing and some other bits that we touched on beforehand, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Have you got anything to shout out? You know your Instagram, anything like that people can go and to follow you?
Oh yeah. I my Instagram is Captain Peter Frank. It's just I don't know. I thought it would be funny if I dressed like a pirate, and it was. It's hilarious. I get such a kick out of it. I think it's like the funniest thing on the planet to just be completely outside of this like societal normality of it's like this paradigm that we have to dress a certain way. You have to group think. You have to follow the leader, and if you don't do that, you're somehow the weird one. Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't know. I thought it'd be hilarious to dress like a pirate. And I get all these looks, and sometimes people judge me. Sometimes people are like, "You're an idiot." I'm just like, I don't know. I think it's just fucking hilarious. So,
Yeah, it is.
but yeah, Captain Peter Frank is my Instagram.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast today. That's sadly the end of the first episode of this series with Peter Frank. Tune in next week, everybody, to find out more about Peter. Thank you very much. Have a good week, and we'll catch you next time.